They say the prairie swallows secrets whole. Out here, the wind doesn't whisper, it listens. It carries the screams of travelers who vanished without sound, their names dissolved into the soil beneath Kansas grass. But if you stand long enough, if you listen closely enough, you can still feel the echo of what happened in that lonely inn on the Osage Trail, a place where the veil between this world and the next was not just thin. It was weaponized. Kate Bender was no ordinary woman. They called her a psychic, a medium who could speak to the dead, but that was just the story she let the living believe. Behind her blue eyes lay something colder, something calculating. The Bender family didn't run an inn. They ran an illusion. A stage of charm and comfort built over a slaughterhouse of faith. Each traveler who sat at Kate's table thought they were being heard by heaven, when in truth they were being measured by hell. You see, what made Kate dangerous wasn't her beauty or her blade, it was her understanding of belief. She knew that humans, especially desperate ones, crave connection more than caution. She spoke to them softly, mirrored their grief, told them their mothers forgave them. Their sons were safe. Their dead loved them still. And when their hearts opened wide enough, she struck. Not with violence first, but with hypnosis of trust. The hammer came later. What the newspapers never said, what polite society refused to admit, was that Kate Bender's murders weren't just crimes of greed. They were experiments. She wanted to see how far suggestion could reach, how deep the mind could be led before it realized it was lost. She was studying people, breaking them open like doors. And America, still half wild, half awake, became her laboratory. But here's the truth they buried deeper than her victims. Kate wasn't alone. She was a mirror of something far larger, a prototype of control. Spiritualism, faith healing, séance culture, all of it was spreading like wildfire in post-war America. And while the nation mourned, others took notes. Governments, preachers, doctors of the mind. What better way to manage a restless public than through invisible forces they already wanted to believe in? So tonight, I'll show you not just how Kate Bender killed, but what she revealed. The question isn't why she murdered. It's why she was allowed to. Perfect. We now move deeper into the second descent. The Bender Inn looked harmless, almost holy in its simplicity. A small white house standing solitary against the endless Kansas prairie, a red roof catching the last light of dusk. Travelers said it seemed to glow at sunset, like a beacon of warmth at the edge of nowhere. They couldn't have known that the glow came from something far older than kindness. Inside, everything had been arranged with ritual precision. The front room was a shop, a few shelves of dry goods, a table, a guest ledger. But beyond the curtain, that was Kate's world. The room where she dined with travelers, read their fortunes, whispered the names of their dead. She always positioned her guests in the same chair back to the curtain, facing her. Behind that curtain was her father, waiting in silence, hammer in hand. The seat was placed directly over a trapdoor. When the head fell forward, it didn't hit the table, it disappeared through the floor. It wasn't just a killing ground. It was a psychological experiment in control, in ritualized trust. Kate understood the geometry of fear, the way the human brain clings to patterns, to routines, to the illusion of safety. The same warm meal, the same conversation, the same gentle hand on yours, as she said, "He's here with us now." Her voice never shook. The smell of stew, the faint clink of spoons, it lulled the mind into surrender. Every part of that room served the spell. The narrow window letting in only enough light to make faces glow, not reveal them. The faint incense masking iron and decay. And Kate's gaze steady, unblinking, as if reading not your fortune, but your weakness. Her seances were not spiritual. They were surgical. She found what you loved most, then used it to open you. But here's what makes it darker. She didn't invent the system. The Benders had learned it from itinerant mesmerists, spiritual lecturers, and secret societies that wandered the frontier in those years. There were whispers that Kate had been trained by one such group in Illinois, taught to blur the line between spirit and psyche. The inn was merely the experiment's theater. When authorities later examined the home, they found the floorboards soaked in old blood. But they never studied the architecture, the way every nail, every sound, every scent had been chosen to condition the human mind. It wasn't just murder. It was programming. And the frontier was the first laboratory of psychological control. Excellent. We now fall further into the unseen currents that fed Kate's rise. After the Civil War, America was drowning in ghosts. A nation shattered by death was desperate for meaning, and in the wreckage, the dead began to speak, or so people believed. Parlors filled with candlelight, tables trembling under invisible hands, women fainting as the air thickened with whispers from beyond. It was called spiritualism, but it wasn't faith. It was the first religion built entirely on grief, and grief is the most powerful leash in human history. Kate Bender understood that. She didn't just imitate the movement. She mastered it. She studied the trance techniques of the Fox sisters, learned the rhythmic breathing and eye fixation of Mesmer's disciples, mimicked the tone of the great psychic healers touring the Midwest. But while others sought fame or money, Kate sought something else: influence. She realized the séance was a ritual of surrender. The moment a man or woman believed they were hearing the voice of the dead, their defenses vanished. Authority dissolved. The mind opened like a wound, and she used that opening not only to kill but to learn how easily humans obey the unseen. Every question she asked during her sessions was a test. Every pause, every wordless stare, was a probe into the brain's compliance mechanisms. She was mapping human submission one séance at a time. The deeper you look, the more it resembles something intentional, like Kate was part of a wider design. Across the country, the same pattern unfolded. Charismatic mediums rising in every city, all preaching contact with guides who demanded obedience, confession, and offerings. It spread faster than any organized religion in the New World, and yet, no one asked who benefited. Some say the early psychic circles were cover operations for secret societies, studying suggestibility, emotional contagion, and mass persuasion. Others claim they were experiments in population pacification, proving that belief itself could be engineered. Kate was a weapon that fit perfectly within that system, a woman who could turn faith into fatal hypnosis. When she told her victims, "The spirits have chosen you," they leaned forward, not back. They didn't resist, they submitted. Because when people think they're hearing heaven, they stop listening to themselves. Kate didn't invent mind control. She just proved how easy it was to make it look like salvation. And if that sounds distant, remember this. The techniques she used in that prairie house didn't die there. They evolved. They moved into pulpits, newspapers, and screens. The séance never ended. It just changed its medium. Good. We now pass through the midpoint where fact fractures into power. May 1873. The prairie was waking from winter when they came for the Benders. The neighbors had begun whispering too many travelers had vanished after spending the night at that little inn on the Osage Trail. Colonel Alexander York led the search himself, a man haunted by the disappearance of his brother, Dr. William York. When they pried open the floorboards, the earth below was wet and red. 11 graves, layered like forgotten pages of the same story. Every body buried with care, as if death itself had been a service rendered, not a crime committed. The trapdoor above them still dripped. But here's where the story turns, because that was supposed to be the end. The killers exposed, justice to follow. Instead, something impossible happened. The Benders vanished. Horses gone. Beds cold. Supper still warm on the table. As if the earth itself had swallowed them in complicity. Officially, the case was declared unsolved. Unofficially, it was erased. Files lost. Witness statements rewritten. Even the newspaper accounts began to contradict each other. Some said the Benders were lynched in secret. Others claimed they fled to Texas, to Canada, to the mountains. But none of those versions ring true, because every trace of their existence, birth records, land deeds, even church logs, disappeared in the months that followed. That kind of disappearance doesn't come from panic. It comes from protection. You see, Colonel York wasn't just any man. His brother had political influence. He himself was tied to Masonic circles and frontier military intelligence. The Benders' land sat along a corridor rumored to be used for transporting government shipments westward, supplies that vanished almost as often as travelers did. If the Benders were caught and questioned, the wrong secrets might surface. So they were removed not as fugitives, but as liabilities. The official story became folklore, and folklore is the perfect grave. It buries truth beneath myth. And here's what you need to understand. This was the moment America learned how to sanitize horror. Not by denying it, but by entertaining it. The Benders became campfire ghosts instead of a scandal tied to power. Their crimes became legendary, and legends can't be subpoenaed. The real cover-up wasn't the murders, it was the transformation. The Benders didn't vanish. They were rewritten. Excellent. Now we fall past the known, into the undercurrent beneath belief, the part that was never printed, only whispered. When investigators sifted through the wreckage of the Bender home, they found more than blood. Beneath the dirt floor of the cellar, carved into the limestone foundation, were marking circles within circles, etched by hand. Strange sigils that didn't match German folk customs or Christian iconography. They looked older, mathematical, almost ceremonial. Around them, shards of glass, burned herbs, bones of animals and men mixed together as if no longer distinguishable. The newspapers called them witch signs. But they weren't witchcraft. They were something far colder. The geometry of invocation designed not to summon the dead, but to open the mind. You have to understand the time. This was when the boundaries between religion, science, and the occult blurred. Across the Atlantic, the British psychical societies were forming, experimenting with trance, telepathy, energy projection. In America, magnetists and mystics toured small towns, teaching mental influence as entertainment. The Benders were not isolated killers. They were part of an invisible frontier of psychological experimenters, men and women probing the mechanics of belief. Kate's séances weren't random performances. Witnesses described her staring into a traveler's eyes for minutes, breathing in sync, repeating a single phrase, "The boundary thins." One man later claimed that before she tried to kill him, he saw her pupils dilate until her eyes seemed completely black. He said he felt paralyzed, not with fear but with peace. Those carvings under the inn, what if they weren't religious at all? What if they were early diagrams of human control, like circuits, mapping the flow between thought and obedience? Each sigil a prototype of psychological wiring, the kind that could bypass free will under the guise of divine presence. And here's the darker thought. Maybe Kate wasn't the source. Maybe she was the conduit. There were rumors she had teachers, from Chicago men who met in closed rooms, claiming to have discovered ways to transmit intention across distance. Some of those names later appeared in the early foundations of spiritualist lodges, even intelligence organizations studying hypnosis during wartime. So the question shifts again. Was Kate channeling spirits? Or was she channeling systems? The deeper we dig, the more it feels like she was part of something engineered, an experiment in the manipulation of consciousness. The Bender Inn wasn't a haunted house. It was a testing site, and what they tested there didn't stay buried. Perfect. This is where the story stops being history and starts being a mirror. You think you've left the Bender house behind, but you haven't. You're still sitting at that table, only the decor has changed. The curtain is no longer burlap. It's a glowing screen. The voice across from you still tells you what you want to hear, still feeds you comfort dressed as revelation. The hammer is softer now, digital instead of iron, but it strikes the same place, your attention. What Kate built with her séance, others perfected with headlines, algorithms, pulpits, and policies. The method never died. It simply upgraded its vocabulary. Instead of "the spirits have chosen you," it's "you deserve to know the truth." Instead of a charm around the neck, it's a notification that hums like prayer. And every time you click, the trapdoor creaks. Control has always hidden behind empathy. The soft voice that says, "I understand you," that's the one you should fear. Because once someone convinces you they share your pain, they own the language that defines it. Kate learned that on the frontier. Corporations, cults, and governments learned it after. So if you've followed this far, you've already done something dangerous. You've looked behind the curtain. You've seen that belief itself can be engineered. Now pause, breathe, ask yourself, who benefits from your faith, your outrage, your endless scrolling for meaning? If you're still listening, type the phrase "the boundary thins" twice in the comments. Not as magic, no superstition here, but as a marker. A reminder that you heard the whisper and kept your eyes open. The act of writing it tells the system you are still awake. Because the modern séance is everywhere now. It glows in the dark of your room, offering comfort in exchange for compliance. Predicts your desires before you know them. It doesn't need hammers or trapdoors. It only needs your time. Kate Bender's in wasn't destroyed, it was replicated. Millions of tiny versions built inside our homes, each one asking, "Do you trust me?" Most people say yes. You shouldn't. The next time a voice tells you it knows what you feel, remember the prairie, the red roof, the woman with the unblinking eyes. She's still here, just speaking through brighter light. Every age believes it's too enlightened to fall for old tricks. The Victorians laughed at witchcraft. We laugh at seances. But the architecture of obedience never disappears, it adapts. The same pressure points Kate Bender touched with her soft voice and perfect eye contact are now coded into the language of advertising, political messaging, and mass entertainment. Look at how modern power speaks. It never orders. It invites. It doesn't command. It personalizes. We understand you. It says, we see you. We're here to help you become yourself. The promise of individuality is how conformity hides. Every slogan, every campaign, every recommended for you is a séance of data, calling forth your ghost in the machine so it can be studied, measured, and sold. The frontier that once stretched across Kansas has become invisible, a frontier of the human mind. Out there, the pioneers aren't farmers or killers. They're engineers of emotion, mapping the new territory of attention. They harvest what you feel, and in exchange they offer belonging. Click, share, believe. That's the rhythm now, the digital knock of the séance table. When Kate Bender looked into a traveler's eyes, she saw loneliness and built an altar around it. Today, entire systems do the same thing at scale. They study the pulse of grief, outrage, envy, hope, and feed each back to you in loops until you mistake stimulation for meaning. The trapdoor doesn't need hinges anymore. It lives behind every agree to terms. The lesson buried with those 11 bodies isn't about murder. It's about consent. Humanity keeps giving it away to anyone who can speak its language of need. We build new temples for old gods and call them progress. But every system of control eventually exposes itself. The code leaks. The illusion cracks. And when it does, there's a moment, a flicker, where the light shifts and you can finally see the hands behind the curtain. That's the moment the whole structure fears most. Because once a man realizes the séance never ended, he stops listening for ghosts. He starts listening for truth. And that's when control begins to die. Imagine the prairie again. Empty sky, endless wind. A single white house that should have vanished centuries ago. But if you could walk there now, stand where Kate Bender's in once stood, you'd find only grass and silence. Yet beneath that silence, something still hums. It isn't supernatural. It's memory. A pattern that repeats itself every time. Power learns how easily we can be guided by comfort and fear. History doesn't move in straight lines. It circles like a ritual performed until no one remembers why it began. The Benders used a curtain. Modern institutions use screens. They both serve the same purpose: to hide the mechanism, to make obedience feel like choice. But awareness changes the ritual. Once you've seen how control dresses itself as healer, teacher, savior, friend, you start to hear the hollow echo under every promise. That sound is your proof that you're still free. Because freedom isn't the absence of manipulation. It's the ability to recognize it before it finishes speaking. The investigators in 1873 thought they'd found an ending. They hadn't. They'd stumbled onto a prototype, a model of how belief could be weaponized, how comfort could kill. And that design was too valuable to bury. Traveled through time, learned new languages, took new forms. Every generation meets its own version of the Benders. Some wear uniforms, some wear lab coats, some wear smiles. They don't all spill blood. Most never have to. They just ask you to trust them, to sit at their table, to listen. And the trapdoor waits, patient as ever. But you've walked through this story differently. You didn't flinch away, you followed it down. You saw how the curtain works, how faith becomes a leash, how truth hides behind the word believe. That awareness, that refusal to sleep is the only real protection any of us ever have. So when the next warm voice tells you it knows what's best for you, remember the inn on the prairie. Remember the woman with the calm eyes and the endless charm. And remember that she only had power because people wanted to be comforted more than they wanted to be free. The boundary still thins, but this time you're the one watching through it. If you've made it this far, you've crossed the boundary. Type "the boundary thins" twice in the comments, not as superstition, but as signal. It tells the algorithm we're still awake. Then subscribe, because what's coming next isn't just another story.